Welcome to the M&A Unplugged podcast. Our mission is to help you be better prepared for your business acquisition or sale. Being prepared will ensure you maximize returns and minimize risks. This is M&A Unplugged with your host, Domenic Rinaldi.
Hey folks, welcome back. I'm Domenic Rinaldi, the host of the M&A Unplugged podcast. Communication is one of those phases in M&A transaction that is oftentimes overlooked or underserved. It is so important that you think through a deal narrative and how that deal narrative is going to be communicated to the various constituents that are going to be impacted by the transaction. So what do I mean by that? Well, you've got employees, you have clients, you have the industry at large, you have vendors, you have partners and affiliates, and all of those folks need to be communicated, and the messaging might be different. It is most assuredly going to be different. And thinking through the messaging and what you want to say and controlling what gets out into the public and what gets to your employees and the vendors is so critical. It's also critical to maybe involve a professional to think through what is the proper messaging. And the time to be thinking about it is well in advance of your transaction. You want to be thinking about during diligence how you be communicating this, what you want to say, so that when you do close on the transaction, you've got a plan and then you're just implementing the plan. And if the plan needs some course correction, you can do that midstream, but you're not trying to make it up on the fly. And in addition to that, one of the best ways to capitalize on an acquisition, assuming that you want to promote the fact that the business has been sold, and sometimes it doesn't make sense to communicate it. You want the acquisition to fly under the radar. I've been involved in situations like that where actually getting the word out, it can be harmful, and you don't want word to get out. You only want to be talking to your internal employees about the sale and maybe select clients or controlling how clients are hearing about it. But assuming that you want to capitalize on the acquisition, one of the best ways to do that is through public relations. With us today is Justin Breen of BrEpic. BrEpic is a PR firm, and Justin built this from scratch just 3 years ago after a career in journalism, with the sole goal of helping people, his clients, tell their stories and get them placed in the media. Justin is an expert at this. And it's so important because what the media is looking at for stories may not be what you think your story is. And people like Justin really can help you formulate that and get the right messaging out. And PR can be a tremendous way to grow your company. And I think you're going to really enjoy some of the key messages from Justin today. Before we get into the interview, please head over to K2 Advisor. If you want to avoid the common deal pitfalls and the risk of losing substantial dollars, you need to know how ready you are for a transaction. And on the site, you'll see a couple of assessments that we've built for buyers and for sellers, so you very quickly in 5 minutes can understand how ready you are. The other thing I want to announce is that I will be personally advising and opening up a small group to folks who want to learn how to buy or sell a business or need some coaching through buying and selling a business. If you're interested in that, we're only opening it up to a limited number of people. Please email us at info@k2advisor.com. Let us know that you're interested in our coaching, and we'll be back to you soon. Being prepared is critical to ensuring that you maximize returns and minimize risks. Thank you for being here and hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hey, Justin, welcome to M&A Unplugged.
Hey, man.
So thanks for being here. For our audience, if you wouldn't mind, could you give them a quick background on yourself and how you got to where you are right now?
Sure. So I was a journalist for 20 years. I create newsworthy stories that media actually cares about, and I pitch them to media on a global level. And my PR firm BrEpic is about 3.5 years old. has clients around the world, only work with visionaries who look at things as investments, not costs. So it's just this giant incubator of geniuses around the world that we're constantly introducing each other for mutual gain. And the byproduct is I'm constantly getting intros to companies around the world that want to hire my firm, and just wrote an international best-selling book called Epic Business that talks about my weird brain and how I built a global business in 3 years.
Very nice. Very nice. Congratulations. Yeah. Well, look, we were talking a little bit before here. I see you everywhere. I see your client stories. So it's working.
Yeah, so there's a movie called For Love of the Game, which is a terrible movie. Kevin Costner's in it, but there's a really good scene in it. He's a pitcher for the Detroit Tigers, and he throws a perfect game. But the one scene that I probably watch the YouTube clip once or twice a week, it's called Clear the Mechanism.
Yeah.
So he's on the mound, and people are yelling at him, and horns are blaring, and so before he throws his first pitch, and then in his head he says, "Clear the mechanism," and everything goes silent around him except an ultra focus on home plate. And so that's how I approach every single day. I just eliminate the noise and only focus on a certain type of visionary type genius who invests instead of looks at things as cost. And those people are running some of the most successful businesses in the world. This is a huge opportunity for them that they're leveraging and investing like crazy now. And so I just weed out all the other nonsense, and my business has exploded since COVID. It's always done well, but Q2 is the company's biggest quarter it's ever had, and it's only going to get better and better because the only people in my network are these tens of thousands of amazing people that also are clearing the mechanism and enjoying life and enjoying these awesome businesses.
Great. Well, listen, as you know, our show focuses on mergers and acquisitions. And what I'd love to talk to you a little bit about today and pick your brain on is, when buyers first take over a business, right, they've got so many things on their plate, right? They're worrying about employees. They're worrying about client retention, vendors. I mean, you name it, learning the business, maybe in some cases, integrating it into theirs. And communication is something that's talked about often. But I would imagine there's some best practices and some things people shouldn't do. So what advice do you have when somebody's first walking into, they've just purchased a new business? How should they think and approach communications?
Yeah, so these are discussions that should be taking place before the purchase is actually made, for sure. Again, so I only work with visionaries, and they would have thought about this long in advance of acquiring a company. They would have, created a communications program that would have been ready for when the acquisition actually took place. So media only cares about two things. One is a good story, which everybody pretty much has, something inspirational, overcome the odds, human interest kind of thing. And so that's one thing. And then two is a news peg, meaning why is it a story now? So the fact that a company was acquired or was bought out, that's an obvious news peg. The reason I've been in media so much lately is because I've had a book that, just came out. So that's a news peg. So, a company being purchased or acquired by someone else, that's an obvious news peg. And, that's something that, again, nice human interest story, why this is happening. And then the news peg is the company was acquired.
So, following that train of thought, there's different constituencies, right? In an acquisition, you've got your employees that you're trying to communicate with, your clients, the marketplace in general, partners and affiliates. How does the story or the news peg all relate back to all of those constituencies? How does it impact employees and clients? Well, how should somebody be thinking about that?
They should be thinking about hiring an expert who actually knows what they're doing. So I can talk to someone for an hour and 55 minutes will be totally useless to what anyone cares about in terms of what a media perspective is, but in 5 minutes, and I'll just know what the story is, and then everything's based around that, and then the news peg. So the stories that my firm creates are, they're perfect for not only news, media, mainstream, both podcasts and that kind of thing, to actually understand at a third grade level why this is important and interesting. But then for the client, the spokesperson or whoever it is goes on these shows or whatever, they have a perfect blueprint to talk about these bullet points that are in the story. So it's a dual pronged effect. In terms of what my firm's approach is, from a client perspective, them reading the story that my firm does, it's not as important. But what is important is when the client talks about the acquisition, they have the story that my firm does as a boilerplate, And then that message is echoed through mainstream media to potential clients or to the employees. Hey, we were on TV. Hey, we were on this podcast. Check it out. Talk about how happy we are to be, part of this company, to be taking over, or whatever it is. So that's what my firm's story serves as. It benefits the client, and then frankly, more importantly, the journalists, because they're not going to pick up some dumb press release that they get hundreds of those a day from people they don't know.
Yeah. So I think that's a really good point. I mean, in this day and age, we're getting so much information thrown at us, right? Stuff from all different angles.
Mm-hmm.
And are we at a point where we're at risk of over communicating? And how do you separate the, good messages from the bad messages, and what's newsworthy and what's not newsworthy?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair question. And again, as a journalist, for 20 years, I got 100 of these ridiculously bad press releases that were not newsworthy and not interesting. So not only does that annoy you as a journalist from the person who's sending it to you, but in my opinion, it damages the company that's hiring these people to send this nonsense to you. So, that's why my firm has been, so successful, is because, again, I clear the mechanism. I know how to do two things at a very high level that cuts through all that clutter and all that noise and focuses on a razor sharp thing that the people in my network, all they care about is results. They just want results. They don't want all this other stuff. They don't care. They have, like you said, when we started this, they have all this stuff going on. They just want someone who's actually going to get stuff done and follow through on the process, which they talked about. So that's it. And from a journalistic perspective, companies hire my firm because, I know what a story is that media actually cares about, and then I'm not sending my media contacts a bad story idea. That's a bad press release. It's going to be something that's actually worth their time. So, I think a lot of the stuff that you're talking about is a lot of the noise that as journalists get really annoyed about, because most people are doing it completely wrong. And, the most successful entrepreneurs I know create a business that solves problems created by others. And so that's what mine does. It solves a problem that was created by other PR firms doing things wrong.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Let me shift back to that entrepreneur that just acquired that business, and nobody buys a business to have it stay steady. When they buy something, they've envisioned something much bigger.
Yep.
And PR could be a really big component of that, right? Getting your name out, building the brand, maybe even charting a new course.
You went mute, Don.
You can't hear me?
I can't hear you. There's some type of weird delay.
Can you hear me now?
So I can hear you, but there's a 5-second delay from when you talk and hit the mic to when I can hear it.
I wonder what's going on.
Now I can hear you at regular length.
You can?
Length. Yes. I have no idea what happened there.
Wow, that's strange. Okay. Sunny day, no storms.
Yep.
All right, we're dealing with it on the fly. So let me go back to that question. I'll do that again.
Perfect.
So Justin, when somebody buys a business, they're buying it because they envision something much bigger. They want to take it in a new direction, or they see an avenue for growth.
Yep. And
PR could be a big part of that, right? One, getting the word out there and building to something bigger. What is your advice to people when they're first taking over a business, and how they should view PR when they've got all this other stuff going on, right? They're trying to learn the business. Mm-hmm. What would your advice be to them?
So again, just as background, I created my entire business model based on how PR firms annoyed me for 20 years. So people classify my business as a PR firm, but it's really not. It's It's more of like high-level storytelling and then media relations, getting stories and news.
Yeah.
So I'll answer it from that perspective. It's arguably the most important thing you can do is tell people about your business in a positive, productive way. I mean, and again, the people in my network, like, they understand that. And again, that's why my business has exploded, is because visionaries with an abundance, positive mindset, realize that telling people about their businesses is a very important, arguably the most important thing. And then getting ahead of, make sure that message is out there before others can do what they will with it. So, again, that's a pretty interesting thing that I'm hearing from most of the people in my network. So to also answer your question, the thing I hear the most from potential clients is we are tired of being the best secret out there. So they have this amazing technology or whatever, that kind of thing, but they're at one level and they need to have more people know about them to get to the next level. So getting that exposure, certainly when you want to acquire a business and you want people to know that, and you want your employees to know that how happy you are to be at this company and that kind of thing, like that's essential. So I think most very high level entrepreneurs understand that, especially the ones now who are pivoting and investing like crazy and acquiring businesses. They didn't get to that level of success by cost cutting or being scarcity mindset or that kind of thing. They did it by understanding the value of being in media and the value of investing in their businesses and brands and the value of acquiring businesses and brands.
Yeah. You maybe you wouldn't agree with this, but my experience has been most people are not good storytellers, right? They have all the information.
No, that's what I know. I 100% agree with you.
Yeah.
So if you ask me to install a light bulb, I'd have a nervous breakdown. But at this, I mean, there are a few people in the world. So I have two superpowers: getting people in media at a high level and connecting people on a global level. And those two things, there are very few people in the world that are better at it than I am. But other than that, I'm basically useless to society besides being a really good dad and average husband. So, but that's what I mean is like, my company's successful because I know what I'm good at, but more importantly, I know what I'm terrible at. And so, no, most people have no idea. I mean, that's why they hire, again, the smart people hire experts to do things that they don't know how to do. So the people that are confident in their superpowers and they know what got them to a certain level, they hire other confident people. Cocky people think they're good at everything. I can't stand those people, but they're the worst potential clients because they think they can do their job for you and they can't because they don't know what they're doing. So, but confident people, they're the best clients because they hire other confident people and they know what their superpowers and they know what their lane is, and then put the teams into place to help them achieve their vision, like you were talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And it goes back to, I think, one of the first points you made in the interview, which is you should be thinking about communications the day you decide that you're going to buy a business.
Oh, even before
right?
that. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, because it's such a critical component of acquiring a business and then setting the right tone going forward. And hiring experts is exactly the right step there. Unless you know what you're doing, you need to hire the experts to do that work.
Yeah. So I can give you an example, and I can't give you specifics on this because there's a lot of NDAs and things like that, which I'm happy to sign, by the way. But so I'm involved with conversations where these things aren't even going to be launched for 3-6 months, and they're already talking to me and retaining me for communication strategy. It's not, it's that's what I mean. And these are 8 to 10 figure businesses. So, and they have not been acquired yet. They have not been launched yet. But that's what I mean is that to go into this shotgun it without developing a communication plan when you do that's very rare in my experiences. It's more what I was talking about is people actually reaching out to me well ahead of time because that's the right model to prepare for that kind of thing.
Yeah. What in your experience, who are you typically working with? Are you working directly with the owner of the business?
That's an excellent question. I'm going to tell you why. So the answer is both. So for smaller, we'll start with that, smaller like project type thing. So that's like someone who's just launching a newer type business, or someone who's writing a book or something. Then it's with the founder CEO. That's my client contact.
Yeah.
For mid-sized to larger companies, it's usually the communications or marketing director, someone in that sphere. So, and in that case, my firm is a hired gun for 2 reasons. One, to create newsworthy stories that media actually cares about, as opposed to the standard press release that most people are sending out that no one cares about. And then 2, for my firm's connections to media, because again, I'm not sending them a bad story idea. So it's a 2-pronged thing. It's either the founder CEO at smaller, sometimes mid-sized companies, but usually at the mid-sized, the larger ones, it's a communications or marketing director, because they have a really good list of story ideas kind of floating around. And then, what my firm's able to do is actually figure out which ones are the most newsworthy and most interesting. And then when media is interested, my firm's able to introduce media to that client contact person. So that's a really good question. Super smart.
So, and then let me just follow that question up with the next, obvious from there is, do you run the risk when that happens in a larger company? So at a smaller company, it makes perfect sense. The owner should be involved, right? Oftentimes they've got their hand on everything, but in those mid-sized businesses, how important is it to hear from the principals as well as the communications people to make sure that there's no disconnects or something's not getting missed, or the story's not really the story, it's actually something else and there just wasn't internal communication going on?
So I'll answer it like this. All the stories that my firm does are always edited and approved by the client, whether it's the communications person or if it gets funneled up to the top. And I'm actually glad that happens. As a journalist, the approval came from the editor, not from the actual business. And, God forbid something was wrong.
Right.
It is what it is. So I actually like the fact that the client edits the story.
Yeah.
In terms of what is newsworthy, usually what the client thinks is newsworthy, for the most part, they're dead wrong. They don't usually know. And that's why my firm is successful, because that's why we're hired, because we know what actual newsworthy part of it is. And so I think it's the opposite of what you said. It's the client doesn't necessarily know what's newsworthy, and my firm does. And then the client edits it and massages it as needed. So
Got it. So with the changing landscape in journalism, and everybody's become a writer, everybody's become a news outlet. What's changed on the media side? As far as getting stories placed and getting good information out there, what have you had to adapt to, if anything, in the last 5 to 10 years?
So that's another excellent question. My business was incorporated April 16th, 2017, so a little over 3 years old. And the number one biggest surprise in a good way has been the power of podcasts like these. Not necessarily fully replacing mainstream media, but certainly on its way. For 2 reasons. One, you can do a deeper dive, real interview on these types of settings, as opposed to a drive-by interview on TV or radio or newspaper or whatever. And 2, what I think is more important is that the visionary wackadoos in my network, who are, genius level, they're listening to these podcasts as opposed to reading Forbes or Wall Street Journal. And it's great to be in those publications, but from what I've seen, it's more of an ego boost than actual leading to real connections or business transactions. So what's been interesting is that now I'm actually seeing it firsthand because of the book I wrote. I'm constantly in media and doing interviews because people are weirdly interested in how my strange brain works. But I've seen these type of interviews lead to huge contracts, huge intros, those kind of things. And also it's great for my business and brand, but then the hosts want to interview my clients as well, because they're like, wow, these are the people you work with. We want to interview them too if they're just as fascinating as you are. So everybody wins in that. So yeah, to directly answer the question, these podcasts are hugely important. And again, I don't know if they're going to fully replace mainstream media, but it certainly take up a huge portion of what people used to consider media. But again, that's just change is good. Change is great. That's called progress. So whatever. People ask me all the time, they're like, oh, how's media doing? I go, well, frankly, it's never been a more exciting time. There's so much really great media out there, and like traditional newspapers might be struggling, but there's all sorts of other news sites that are popping up in their place, led by former journalists of those great newspapers or other news sites, and they're just figuring it out. I mean, it's people are becoming more entrepreneurial in general, and they're just going with it. So as opposed to like, oh, change is horrible. What's going on? What's wrong with this? Be like, no, embrace it. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, if somebody is not catching on that podcasts is a new medium that is really going to matter, go look at what Joe Rogan, go look at what Joe Rogan just got paid by Spotify, right? For an exclusive. I mean, and that's just one example. There are many out there that are carving out a path in this.
Well, what podcasts are, like, in terms of like direct revenue, people paying you to be a podcast host, I mean, maybe there probably could be more examples like that, but more of it's just more of a funnel to meet the right people. That's what, and to get, or the people listening to it, they're like, oh man, really want to talk to this guy. And that's where I've seen is the real value, is these intros or people who have reached out to me because they've heard this. And again, it's great for my clients too. So
without a doubt, I see it day in and day out. Our podcast, we get calls from around the world now.
Right. Why not?
We're downloaded in 47 countries, this podcast, and the calls we're getting from around the world for help on mergers and acquisitions is something I would have never thought of when we first started this. It's been unbelievable.
So, and the beauty of what you're saying is twofold, right? One, you have the complete right mentality. And two, it's only the beginning. Like 47 countries, you'll be in 50 soon, and then you'll be in 60. And there's no limit to it when you have the right mentality. And that's why I get frustrated when I get certain questions about like, what about this? I go, well, no, like this is how it is, man. So embrace it, enjoy your life, and abundance. That's what it's about. And when you preach that and live that, it just attracts other people like that. So when you started this, you're like, I don't know what's going to happen. But look at what's happened because of it. And again, it'll just keep getting better and better.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll say, I mean, complete novice, tech novice, everything novice, podcast. I had no idea. And we stumbled our way through it to this point. And, anything we had written down early on, the only thing that we've stayed true to from day one was our mission of, we want to educate people on mergers and acquisitions so they can make better decisions and be more ready, whether they're looking to buy or sell. That was our mission from day one. It's never changed.
That's your core value. Great. And then everything else, that's what I mean. So I only work with visionaries who look at things as investments, not costs. So that's that, and everything else falls in after that. So you have a core mission, and then you just watch it grow.
Exactly. So Justin, what advice or closing comments would you have for anybody listening in about communications or anything else that you think would help folks as they look at mergers and acquisitions?
If you think you know what you're doing in this space, you're probably wrong. And then two, it's very important to get out ahead of this sooner rather than later. Media is a very fickle, very strange place. I mean, most journalists are strange. I'm definitely strange, but that's why I'm a journalist. And they're very particular how they want things done. And it's a process. It's not like, oh my God, we launched it and now we're in all these news outlets 2 minutes later. It's definitely a process that takes time. And so planning ahead is great. And please don't think you're going to be an expert at this, because if you're doing 50 things with your own company, I'm guessing being a communications expert is not one of those. So
no doubt. No doubt. Well, Justin, congrats on the success. Congrats on your book.
Thanks.
Thanks for being here. If folks in the community wanted to get in touch with you, how could they reach you?
Sure. So I have about 40,000 followers in social media now. LinkedIn is the best way to find me. 22,000 followers there. So Justin Breen on LinkedIn, and then my company's website is BrEpicLLC.com. B as in boy, R-E, P as in pony, I-C as in cobra, LLC.com, BrEpicLLC.com.
All right, Justin. Great to be with you today. Thanks, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, man. I really enjoyed this. Appreciate it.
Yep. I hope you enjoyed this episode. All of today's information will be available in the show notes. If you enjoy our content, please remember to subscribe and review our podcast. I look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of the M&A Unplugged podcast. And until then, please remember that scaling, acquiring, or selling a business takes time, preparation, and the proper knowledge.